Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Master series. This is the 41st, and as you may know from the previous episode, we ended there on a high note with a win with black pieces against a higher rated opponent. So the confidence was high going into this round. It was the round number 4 of the Roquetas Chess Festival, in which I got white pieces against once more higher rated opponent, Lorenzo Perea Fruet, young 16 years old FIDE master who played like 7 different systems against e4, which is normally the move I would play. So for the second time during this tournament, I went for the d4 move on the move number 1, and I've decided to play something solid, which was the Catalan. So Catalan system includes the g3 move, and that's exactly what we get on the board. Note that even though it was the first round of the day, we were continuously playing 2 rounds a day, therefore I did not have enough time to prepare against all of it, let's say. And but one line I looked up was exactly the one that my opponent chose, because he played that also in some European Youth Championship, and it was d5, knight bd7, c6. And I've prepared a move knight b to d2 in here. I'm not sure if it's the most common one, and I'm pretty sure it's not. However, the aim is simple. With the knight being here, I would like to in the future play both c4 and e4 moves. I believe c4 immediately is possible too, but I saw the game of my opponent there when he took and he got a decent position, so I thought, okay, maybe knight b to d2 will be at least a little bit of a surprise to him. And actually he surprised me a little bit in this variation, because normally I guess what black is supposed to play is to develop the bishop and castle, but in the game my opponent went for b6, bishop b7 and queen c8 continuation, so focusing only on the queen side, abandoning really the king side activity. And since in normal, let's say, mainline variation, I knew that there is like rook d1, b3 or e3, e4, sorry, candidate moves. There were 3 of them. I was thinking, okay, like how does the variation chosen by my opponent make the position different? And I felt, all right, since the king is still in the center, perhaps going for the most straightforward option and opening up the center is the best way to go to. So that's why I chose e4, after which d takes c4 happened, which I kind of expected. d4 would not be the best, I guess, in this move order and variation, because I would simply gain too much of space control, center control and all that stuff. dc4 also, I believe, goes away from the main lines. However, this is exactly the move I was preparing mostly, so I kind of got it right. But as I've said, in the different move order. Nevertheless, it was not a surprise yet, but after knight c4 b5, I had to think and think for a long time. I believe I've spent here like 15 minutes or even more than that, deciding where to jump to with the knight. There are 2 obvious candidate moves, which are knight e3, knight e5. Knight e5 is by far the most active one, the most common one and natural, I would say. However, knight e3 also has some merit to it. The point is that after 95, I got stuck in the calculations, and I guess that's the theme for me as a player, and you may know it from the round number 2. Make sure to check that out, because yeah, instead of trying to focus on the long-term planning and strategy, I'm just going, okay, where can I sacrifice something and make the things more complicated and straightforward? Because in here actually in general, I was expecting c5 to be the move that my opponent is aiming for, and knight e5 was aimed towards it, against it, and that's what I was calculating the most, because after c5, I had some knight f7 ideas. There might be quite shocking to you, and I was unsure yet whether would I sacrifice immediately, or maybe after d5 and then ed5, maybe knight f7 here or something like that. As you can tell, Ivarbar perhaps likes the former option better. The point is that I spotted that since the king is in the center, I might have such possibilities, and I've spent those over 15 minutes calculating that. But the problem with that was I didn't really focus on any other alternatives for the opponent, and actually he has one obvious one that he played within like 2 minutes, which is knight e5. He just simply traded, and the point is that if I take the e5, I have doubled e pawns. So even though I have the majority on the king side, I was really unsure if there is any way to use it in a proper manner, to be honest. But after knight e5, I am just losing the pawn. So that's the problem. And the problem for me as a non-Catalan player, let's say, for the most part, is that even though I knew that such opportunity exists, and as you can tell, Ivar Bar approves, I knew that it should be like humanly approved too. I didn't know how to really continue the initiative. So once more, after 15 minutes spent in this exact moment, I spent another, perhaps also 15 minutes in here, or at least 10, deciding should I go for the complications and sacrifice a pawn, or should I go for the position in which strategically I don't know what to do. So yeah, since I am more of an aggressive type player, I went for the sacrifice. So I went knight e5, queen d4, bishop f4, protecting the knight and developing the bishop. And after queen b6, the question is like, what do I do? And I believe that this exact moment and the game itself shows the difference between me as a player and the 2400 players and 26 and all that stuff, because Catalan is very popular at the very top of the chess world, because players there are okay with giving up the pawn long term and playing without it for the most part of it. I'm not that great and with that kind of thinking, and it scares me a little, to be honest, to play without a pawn for such a long time. So instead of trying to make it like take it slow, which is exactly the way that I should be playing it, meaning that I should try to uh, play a4, develop the rooks, put a little bit of let's say strategic pressure instead of tactical one. I really didn't feel the position, and I thought to myself, okay, I need to do something like active and aggressive about it, as usual. So there are ideas, aggressive ones, which are, for example, to push g4 and g5, and computer approves, let's say. However, even at like for my mind, it was too much, I guess, but maybe something to look up for the future. And I decided to firstly start with rook f to d1, and my goal overall was to not allow my opponent to castle. And the castle is coming now, so I have to fight against it. But as I've said, it was not the way to go. The way to go was to play a4 and rely on the queen side pressure to the opponent, because imagining that a4 happens, some even castling, I can either push a5, making the queen really uncomfortable, and or I can mix it up with knight d7 with some exchanges on d7 and activating my rook, or I can actually try to drop back, play b4 and block everything there. So yeah, plenty of ways to continue, plenty of which are not that forcing, not that exactly, easy to deal with, and therefore I didn't go for it. I wanted to stop the castling, so I chose pretty bad, I would say, variation of bishop g5 and then bishop takes f6. The whole goal of it was, as I've said, not allowing opponent to castle, but I simply gave up the two tempos, gave up the bishop pair, and my opponent simply took with a pawn. And with such pawn structure, with the pawn advantage, with the bishop pair advantage, I'm not even sure if he will castle anymore. So all my tries were useless mostly, and my initiative is gone. So quite well misplayed, let's say, middle game from my perspective, unfortunately. So yeah, and that's what I've missed. At this point, obviously, castle was not yet possible because of the bishop f6, knight d7. After queen c7, here after bishop f6 that I would love to see, I was planning on playing knight d7, covering the f8 square, but after gf, it's not that easy to play knight d7, even though computer likes this move as the best one. Yeah, from the human perspective, playing the knight there, look at this, like not really having an option back, the c5 being the only one, and actually the one that I underestimated. This is exactly how should I play it. Yeah, humanly not that easy, I would say. Yeah, I just went back. I just went back, gave up on the position, on the initiative, and accepted the fact that I've misplayed the middle game. And after knight g4, which I chose, there was h5 played, knight e3, and my knight, who jumped to e5 like 8 moves ago, and it was very important decision for me, and I've spent so much time there. In the end, eventually still ended up on the e3 square. So yeah, life is funny sometimes, but obviously it was not funny to me during the game because well, I was so worse in here. Nevertheless, I kept trying. My opponent chose the h4 move, which even though is computer approved, I didn't like during the game, so that's why I gave it a dubious move mark, let's say, since I believe that the control over the g4 square was kind of important. My opponent gives that away, so after a4, a6 finally played, I played queen e2, aimed towards control over the square, maybe with queen g4 in mind, maybe with knight g4 in mind. We'll see about it, about this. And as of now, my opponent chose to take on g3 and play queen e5. And only now I kind of realized, okay, why did he play the variation that he played? Meaning that he wanted to push the h-pawn as far as possible, to open up the h-file, to activate the queen, and to, I guess, try initiative of his own. As of now, the most tempting way for me to continue was to play knight h4, knight g4, and after queen h5, bishop f3. The point is that even though my king seems like it's not the best in the world because of this battery, I actually cover all the important squares around it, and also I am, trying myself some tricks with knight f6 coming. So yeah, I guess it was the way to go. I was just really unsure whether such piece placement is a healthy one, let's say, and I felt like I would be repeating the mistake of trying to go for the specific variation instead of trying to play a healthy long-term moves, because if this will not work out, then like what was the point of it all? However, actually in here it was the way to go, and but I think that I completely missed the idea that is possible in here that came up during the group analysis, which was the queen g5, which is a way to go from the pressure, and now e5, f5, knight f6. This was the idea that would be really good one, because after bishop f6, ef6, let's say queen f6, I have now a takes b5, and thanks to the spin, opponent can take only with a pawn. And now I'm going through the a file, which is exactly what I wanted to accomplish during the game. I just didn't know how to do it. And even though I am temporarily 2 pawns down, my initiative is quite an important one and a powerful one, because moves like this simply won't work tactically. So as you can tell, it's a mix of strategy, tactics, concrete stuff, long-term stuff, and all this. And I couldn't figure that out, to be honest, during the game, unfortunately, because I was, I guess, kind of close to it. And in the game, as I've said, I decided against playing that way. I wanted to play healthy moves this time, unfortunately, and I went for ab5 with the idea that if ab5 happens, then I can try to play, knight g4, rook a7 combination of moves and all that. And if the cb5 happens, I can play rook a to c1, which is healthy looking move, with the idea that I will be exchanging the rooks on c file. Therefore, through the C and D files with my queen and the rook, I might try to enter the opponent's position and maybe do something about it. However, I've missed that king f8 is a possibility. Very interesting move, obviously, especially in the, let's say, Polish chess world. And not only that, the point is that after king f8, king g7, opponent maintains the control over the h file, makes the king safer, rooks will be protecting each other, and even if I attempt to take there and play rook c1, opponent is just on time to play there, and as I've said, king is safe, rook is so fine, bishop pair will be, playing out, I guess, very well. So yeah, I have plenty of problems. Thankfully, though, my opponent went for queen g5 move. It's not much worse by any means, at least what I thought. So that's what I thought during the game. However, computer suggests that I can try to play with the queen to the d file and maybe create some pressure there. I didn't really think about it because queen g5 was a human move that I included in my calculations when going for ab5, so I simply followed my my gut and my calculations, variations, because in here I was planning on taking on c8 anyway, bishop c8, queen c1, and yeah, as I've said, I have the D and C files control, so that's at least some counterplay that I was relying on. But my opponent went for castling, and it's still a good situation for him. However, I still feel like with the king f8 g7, it will be a little bit version for my opponent because rook would still be active on h file. On f file, at least as of now, it doesn't do much. As of now, the problem of mine is, I believe, with the bishop c5 possibility, because after that move I'm hit there, and not only there, because the problems are even longer, let's say. Therefore, I decided to go with the bishop f3 move. A cheeky try, I would say, because after bishop c5 now I have knight g4, and with that I am covering the g file and therefore not allowing to exploit the pin, and also I am protecting the f2 pawn. And not only that, on top of it all, I am planning on playing some a5 e5 move in order to disrupt the connection between the queen and the bishop. So I felt like this move is a very good one, and also on top of that, the idea of the opponent might be to push e5. The idea of his would be then to, if I can try to play like this, I would be happy, but my bishop on f3 is hanging. But I realized that if I just give up the knight in here on h6, I might be also getting an okay position. Actually, it's not that fine, not that great, because there is some king g7, rook h8, queen h2, bishop h3 possibility, maybe. And actually, I might not be surviving that or any other similarity to it. So yeah, I guess I would have to give it another thought, but that's out of the question anyway, because in here my opponent rather quickly played queen c5 move, just inviting me to exchange the queens, which I obviously refused. But after queen e2, I felt like I am giving up on the game, because I am, as I've said previously, pawn down, bishop pair down with no real counterplay. So I'm just waiting for a loss, more or less. And this was the feeling that I had during this move. And immediately after rook d8 was played, I felt, okay, maybe I'm not that worse anymore. So that's funny how chess works sometimes. What do I mean? I mean that after rook d8, I spotted the possibility of exchanging the rooks and playing queen d2. And now, thanks to the fact that the pawn structure around the black king is disrupted, when the bishop goes away from my queen's attack, I have knight g4. And with the queen and knight eyeing the king side, I mean, maybe there is something there, you know, the most obvious try would be to play like this and so on. So maybe I am willing to and able to do something about it. My opponent went with bishop b7, which seemed counterintuitive for me during the game, because it just gives up the d7 square for my queen to go for. So I just happily obliged, and I just played queen d7. Funny enough, as you can tell, Ivarbar does not like it, and in fact I was awarded with the blunder mark for this move, which I find amusing, because human-wise I feel like there is nothing wrong with this move. Actually, in here the move to play was queen f4, and it's also based on the tactics, because I'm hitting the pawn, and the idea is that it's not the only case, because the other case is that I am actually threatening to take the bishop with the double attack, and that's exactly what's more important. And in here I would be actually making the game equal, but it's the tactic that I've missed. Uh, Important to note, I guess, is that I was low on time in here. Don't remember how low, but I believe that around 10 minutes mark on it, or even lower. So yeah, I saw queen d7, I played queen d7, but after bishop c6, queen c8, king g7, I realized that what computer realized before, or rather immediately after queen d7, which is that, okay, I gave a check, and so what? Queen is not like a green one, an amazing one. It has nowhere to go in the near future. I am uncoordinated, so like, what am I planning to do? So for example, the move awaiting one that I can try to make is like king g2, but then the problem is that my opponent can simply take on e4, and after I take on c5, he can take on f3 and then exchange most of the pieces, grab another pawn advantage and win the game easily, right? So Yeah, I was in a big trouble here, and I believe this was the one of the last moments in which I was able to calculate anything deeper because of the time travel. So, what are my choices, guys? Objectively, I'm losing. So maybe I can do something practically. And by practically, I mean maybe not something that's the best in the world, and the human will disapprove it for sure. Human? No, engine. But humanly, it might cause some problems. So I looked at the knight h6 idea with the simple trick in mind that if my opponent accepts the knight, I can actually deliver the perpetual check and make use of this queen that is stuck on the 8th rank with not so much going on. So that was the idea in mind. However, after knight h6, I've calculated that after queen c1 with the double attack, king g2, queen h6, queen c6, I might be happy because I reached the position with the opposite colored bishops. But then I calculated deeper with queen d2, hoping to get the pawn and the passer. And this passer might be a powerful one, so I wanted to not allow that. And I calculated queen a6, but after queen a6, there is bishop c5. Sorry, bishop c5, yeah. And the problem is that my f2 pawn is falling. And on top of that, obviously, queen b2 is also a choice for black. It's up to further consideration, is it winning for sure for them or not, because the opposite colors bishops are there. But maybe it is. Nevertheless, I didn't like even this variation, and on top of that, there is bishop c5. But since that's the case, and if there was no bishop c5, I would be kind of okay to at least try this knight h6. I was thinking, okay, can I stop this bishop c5 in the future? And I found a way to do it, guys, because I played b4. Funny looking move, pushing the pawn to an unprotected square attacked by basically two pieces. So like, what's the point? Well, the point is exactly what I've told you. The easy calculation is that when opponent accepts the pawn, I can take the bishop. So that's, yeah, that's easy. However, what happens after he plays with the queen here or there? So after queen c1, I was planning on playing simply queen king g2, I guess. And the problem for my opponent is that it's not easy to find a move for him. Or maybe I was planning to play king h2 actually. Yeah, king h2. Because the thing is that if he does like, I don't know, something, I was planning on playing e5. And the idea is that now since my king is on h2, not g2, my opponent cannot take my bishop because I will take his queen. And e5 threat would be actually a big one, at least for my eyes. So yeah, I was happy with that. So queen c1 was not the most powerful move in my eyes, but queen c3 was the one that I was worried about because it hits the bishop, right? However, in here, now I've played knight h6. That's the case. And the point is that I calculated queen c1, and now it's the better version of it, right? Because after king g2, queen h6, queen c6, bishop b4 now instead of queen d2, queen b2, right? Queen a6, I'm actually on time to grab the b pawn, and I'm not threatened on the f2 square. So like queen g5 might be played in order to protect it. I can attack it. My opponent would attack my e4 pawn, and I can even give it away because in that situation I am still a pawn down, but all the pawns are on the same side of the board. We have the opposite colored bishops. I realized, okay, now that's a draw, and that's what I wanted to achieve. So by b4, by including b4 in before playing knight h6, I allowed myself to have this line, which had a high drawing chances and possibilities. However, only after playing a move, I realized that I am simply losing to a not so hard variation to find, but maybe psychologically quite hard to comprehend and even imagine that something like this might happen, because after the move I saw that queen e1 is the new possibility. From c5 square there was no way to give a check like that, therefore I only considered queen c1, and even then when the queen went to c3 I only considered this move. But queen e1 is a big improvement because after king g2 there is bishop takes e4, queen protects the bishop and is under no pin as if it was on the c1 square. And the point is that if I now try to deliver the perpetual check with queen g8, queen h8, which is my whole point of the variation, there is simple bishop h7. So Is it hard or easy to find? Let me know, guys, in the comment. For me it was hard, and for my opponent even harder, because I spotted it after my move. My opponent didn't spot it at all. So yeah, this maneuver of the bishop might have been hard. Nevertheless, that's exactly what we didn't get in the game. But what do we get after knight h6? Bishop f8. Bishop f8 as another natural way of dealing with the pressure on the 8th rank from my opponent. And I decided, okay, I am just going like all in for it, because there is nothing that I can lose. I am lost anyway for the most part of the game. I am low on time. Let's just attack with all I've got. So even though my bishop is hanging and my knight is hanging, I am playing queen c7, not caring about either of the pieces, because I'm still going for this perpetual check that I was hoping to achieve. At this point, my opponent accepted the knight. Actually, accepting the bishop would be already drawing, because after queen f7, king h6, queen f8, I don't care if the king goes here or there. Like everywhere, I have the perpetuals, either like that or like that, and so on. So yeah, that's one variation in which I am drawing. After king h6, I am not drawing yet. Queen f7 happened, and the problem is that after bishop b4, which happened in the game, I don't even have a check, like a useful one, because okay, I can play queen h5, but king g7, there are no others, right? Okay, I have one more, but yeah, it's pointless. I will not achieve anything by those. So yeah, I had to find an idea of how to play and how to continue, and I found queen g8, which is the natural way, because that's exactly what I was hoping for the past like 5 or more moves with this perpetual in mind. And in here, the funny thing is that I was already like down to 3 minutes or something. My opponent was having the 20. And that's the topic and the dilemma that I've had the round before. And I mentioned that during the analysis, because in the round number 3, I had more time. And the question is, should I use this time to think, or should I push and play fast to make the opponent's life harder? And in here, I guess that's exactly the same dilemma that my opponent had. Should he use his time to make sure that he is winning, or should he just go for it and play faster in order to make me lose the game in that way or the other? He went for the latter, he went for playing fast, and he blundered a win. How? Well, there are not so many ways to win actually, and the only one is the one that he already, let's say, missed as an idea, because the idea is to play bishop e4 now with the same bishop h7 after I give a check. But you can say, okay, hold on, I can take the bishop. Yes, but once more in here queen e1 would happen. Even if I go here, there is queen e4. I can start checking my opponent, and actually covering the check now would be dubious, and it's not that clear how black is winning. He is winning because he has one more bishop, but it's not that easy. However, in here, king g6 might be played, and then king will try to escape in here. So even though I can try to deliver few more checks, it's like they will be like no more of them like around, let's say, this time. So yeah, it may seem that it's a long variation, but it's pretty straightforward to see that king escapes and there is nothing I can do about it. However, as I've said, my opponent decided to go for the fast play, and he played f5, which is obviously nearly as good, humanly thinking, like very good try, right? Because it opens the diagonal, therefore I don't have any useful checks. And after queen e6, king g5, once more, all the squares that I could, check from are taken. So I will be losing in here sooner or later. However, guys, even though I was so low on time, I found a way in here to not lose the game with an amazing trick, and it was it takes f5 simply. And obviously my opponent now cannot take back because I've opened the pressure to the bishops. So if my opponent just recaptures, I can even deliver the check and grab the bishop that way or the other and draw the game easily. Therefore, it was not his idea. His idea was to play queen e1. And the point is, though, that obviously after king d2, he can take with a check, maintain the bishop advantage, and there will be no perpetual, for example, in this variation, because the king escapes due to the fact that the f8 square is covered. But, I have king h2 now, inviting the queen to take me on f2, and I have king h3, and like, what can the opponent do? What's his problems? Well, his problem is simple. He is threatened with checkmate. Therefore, he has to either take the pawn or continuously check me. So he gave a check and gave a check, but nothing happens really. There is no way for him to, let's say, grab my bishop and then check me at the same time. Therefore, he might have the e takes e5 in his mind. However, in here I can try to... okay, in here actually I have one more very nice route to a draw, which would be the perpetual like this. But if my king was on h2 and e takes f5 happens, I don't have such way, because in here actually the king escapes through the g4 because my king is here, not there. So that's one funny variation. However, in here I was thinking about stalemate possibilities like g4, fg, and queen g4, something like that. And in here it's stalemate. I'm not sure why. Oh yeah, queen h7 here, queen g7, and the king cannot go here or here because I take the queen. And if he goes back, I go back. So that was one way to try to draw the game. But there is king h4 now, very important move that I fortunately see. And yeah, if I now give a check, now opponent takes and escapes and so on. So plenty of possibilities, none of them working unfortunately. Thankfully though, even if at that point my opponent would have taken on f5 with the pawn, instead of trying to go for the perpetuals, one more note to say. In here, computer says it's a drawn position even if the king escapes, but from my point of view, it was really risky to just allow the king to go like to the e file, d file, and try to hide between like the bishops or whatever. So instead of that, I would in here play queen e6, and simply after he goes like here, I would just take the c6 bishop. I don't really remember how. Maybe with the bishop, maybe with the queen. I'm not sure if that matters much, because even though I'm 2 pawns down, still we have the queens on the board with some perpetual checks possibilities. We have the opposite colored bishops. The pawns are attacked. So overall, I would say that this position is a drawn one. But it was kind of surprising to me that my opponent didn't even try it, because at this point, instead of taking on f5, he just simply gave me one more check, the other one, and at the end I just, offered a draw, which was accepted. And yeah, that's how I managed to draw the game in a pretty amazing fashion, I would say, because when you consider the opening I chose and my, let's say, idea for the initiative, which was not working, middle game, end game, I was not playing and having a good game. But in the end, thanks to some tricks, I got it. I get a half of a point, which is always a nice way of dealing with such bad position. So even though I forgot about the review part in the past few games, I will now try to show you guys how big was the accuracy in this game, because it was a crazy one, right? So in the end, as you can tell, our scores, mine and the opponent's one, were 87-88% accuracy. So in the games I did not show you, it was over 90 for both players. So in terms of accuracy, it was the worst game of all until this point in this tournament. However, I guess according to, let's say, attractiveness of this game, it was by far the best one. Many things were going on, and a sharp game, sharp position, and a decent result. So that's always what I will happily take. And yeah, that's that for the game. And note that there was still another one this day. So you will see the analysis tomorrow. But as you can tell, this game was pretty exhausting. Will I manage to play well also in the next one? You will see tomorrow. Thank you for watching this analysis. Leave a like, a subscription, and we'll see each other shortly. Bye bye.